Now, right? We're recording now. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Welcome to the WEBRTC WEBRTC working group meeting. Note that this meeting will be recorded, even though you don't see the recording indicator in the Meet interface. If you do not wish to be recorded, please state so now. Otherwise, we can continue. I'm not hearing anyone, so welcome to the May 20th, 2025 meeting of the WEBRTC working group. This working group abides by the WEBRTC IPR policy. Only people and companies listed here are allowed to make substantive contributions to the WEBRTC specs. Today we have some topics that we'll go over in a bit. Also wanted to highlight our next upcoming meetings, which is June 17th and July 15th. And there is also no meeting in August, which I should have included on this slide. And so here's the link to the meeting info, the latest drafts, and we also need a scribe. Do we have a volunteer?
I'll do it.
Thanks, Tom. Yes, again, the meeting is being recorded, even if it doesn't say so in the interface. And we abide by the WEBRTC Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct. Let's keep it cordial and professional. We're using the raise hand tool in Meet. And we have a speaker queue. Document status, hosting within a repo does not imply adoption. Adoption requires call for adoption on the mailing lists. And so be aware of that. So issues for discussion today are broken down as follows. And we'll try to give a 2-minute warning, time warning for topics to move things along. So with that, we can go to the first topic, transient activation after get display media.
Okay, thank you. So I'm I'm here with Google, and basically I'm going to talk about transient activation after get display media is called. So just a quick reminder, transient activation is defined by MDN, or described rather, as user is currently interacting with the page. So, for example, if the user has recently mouse clicked or pressed the keyboard or in some other way did some meaningful interaction with the web application, that confers transient activation for a brief time. And brief time is basically implementation dependent. In Chrome, it's a blank at 5 seconds. I'm not sure about Safari's and Firefox's implementations, but my quick experiments with it indicated that at least on Safari, this was different depending on which web API was gated. But the point is that it's not it's not defined. It is intentionally flexibly defined. So some web APIs are gated by this requirement, examples being full screen, where you take an element and you ask to make it full screen with request full screen. There's document picture in picture, that's request window. There's clipboard APIs, and most notably, get display media itself, right? If you want to ask the user to start sharing the screen, first the user has to interact with the web application. And that kind of, to prevent recursion, let's just explain what we're going to talk about today. We're not going to talk about the fact that get display media requires transient activation, right? That is status quo, and there is no need to change that for now. We are going to talk about how after get display media resolves, we might want to trigger or to perceive that as transient activation being given to the page again. So for that, let's go through a couple of observations. Number one, when the get display media is called, the user is shown a user agent prompt, and the user agent, the user can take arbitrarily long or short to interact with the prompt, right? Could be a second, could be 7 seconds, could be any amount of time. And currently, the spec does not require get display media to consume the activation. But even if it did, it is very likely that the user takes so long to interact with the prompt that basically, by the end, we no longer have transient activation. and we cannot call web APIs like request PIP, request full screen, etc. And that leaves some very obvious room for improvement, because when we start screen sharing, a context-aware web application can serve the user better by already taking a couple of actions, right? It could start playing, media that the user pre-configured. It could go full screen if it knows that the user wants to record something like a video game or presentation. It can trigger PIP. And that is, moreover, if you're capturing another tab or window, it is very likely that the user agent chooses to actually focus that tab or that window, which means that if you now had to navigate back to the video conferencing application or the recording studio, that's going to be a bit annoying, right? Could take some users quite a long time, and to do all of that just to deliver one more transient activation and then go back to whatever they were capturing, that's adding insult to injury. So ideally, we want to avoid all of this, right? We want to make life easier for the user. So to that end, there is a very simple proposal here. There's a lot more text here than you need to read. There's only the part in green that is relevant right now. That's the only new part. And basically it says, right before successfully resolving the promise that getDisplayMedia returned, pretend that transient activation has just been granted, right? It says it in spec language, and I welcome any proposal to improve that. But basically it says, hey, if the user rejects the prompt, nothing changes. If the user approves the prompt and starts sharing something, you have got transient activation again for however long the specific implementation things is relevant. So that's it. That's my proposal. What do you guys think?
All right, I see myself on the queue. So overall, I like this proposal. I think it's a good idea. It does raise some questions in that it's important that getDisplayMedia required transient activation in the first place. Otherwise, this creates an opportunity to annoy the user and then get transient activation as an exploit. And so I know that current implementations don't all implement transient activation for getDisplayMedia, so it'd be nice to clarify that as a requirement for this edition. So that's one thing.
If I could just ask for clarification. So definitely the only implementation I'm aware of that doesn't currently implement the requirement for transient activation is Chrome, and we're working on fixing that. We have it behind the flag. That's great. I'm just not sure where the spec needs to mention that, because the spec already requires transient activation for getDisplayMedia. So what more do we need to do?
I agree in this case that the spec is clear then. Thank you for that information. That's good to hear. That we'll have alignment there. That was my concern. I had one more question, but it escapes me right now.
Is it may versus should?
I'll let you go, and I'll jump back on the queue if I remember. Ewan?
Yeah, sure. I think it's fine. It makes sense to somehow allow it. The only issue is, as you said, if the page is in the background, and now there's user activation at the point where the page is in the background, and it's not really unexpected. So you don't have focus, and you have transient activation. At least in Safari, it will be surprising a little bit. I don't know about other implementations. I guess it's a general transient activation issue, maybe. So maybe there is something we should. So I would tend to proceed with this change and file an issue on HTML spec about transient activation, explaining what we are doing and cross-checking that it's fine. There's no corner case that would be bad, something like that.
Thank you. I heard two different things. I heard you saying that you think this is fine, and I heard you asking for other work. Could you just clarify, like, are you saying that you're okay with making this change, but you're requesting a follow-up be done afterwards?
I would say that we can proceed with the PR And in parallel, we check with the people that define a transient activation, whether we are not like doing something completely crazy according to them. So filing a GitHub issue on the HTML spec, explaining what we are doing. And if we do not receive any feedback, we will proceed. And if we receive very strong feedback that we should not do that, then we can always try revert and reconsider.
Understood. And do you think that it would be possible to maybe specify this as a may, so that we, browsers that don't have this problem basically can be unblocked? So, for example, if you're sharing the entire, including Safari, because if you're sharing the entire screen, then you're still in the foreground, and this problem does not manifest.
Yeah. The transient activation area is so full of, it's so incompatible. Well, the web is very incompatible with regards to how user activation is, or transient activation is defined and implemented in browsers. It seems good if we could keep mapped, but if we cannot, then watering down to should is good to me. But we could try to get feedback from the transient activation guys, and maybe go back to should or may based on their feedback, starting with a must maybe.
Okay, so and do we need to wait for them, or do we just merge this PR, barring anybody else objecting right now? But should we just merge this PR and then revisit it if they give negative feedback, or do we want to wait for them?
I don't know. I'm not very in a hurry, so it really depends on your end as well. If you're planning to implement it very, very soon, then we should be proactive in both things, both the PR and seeking feedback.
I would like to follow up on all of this, like basically send the PR, send the request, but also implement this. But because we expect this at the worst case to be a may, then it's like if they have, I don't expect them to have any feedback that would make us want to completely reconsider, but rather maybe it would only be relevant for screen share, but not for window share, or window share, but only if if we didn't change focus, etc.
All right.
Sounds reasonable to me.
Awesome.
Yeah, it seems reasonable to me as well. Sorry, I'm on the queue. And I don't think we necessarily need or even want may here, because as Ewan points out, it's such a flexible area anyway, so it'd be nice. The goal here is some, web compat. I did remember my question, which was you mentioned, thank you, Elad, you mentioned that we don't consume the user activation or the transient activation. I'm wondering if part of that reason was that if you're really quick, it actually works today within 5 seconds, perhaps in Chrome. So if that was the intent, would it be, now that we're adding this at the completion of the prompt, should we also add consumption of the original user activation?
So my personal suspicion would be that probably this got spec'd before consuming transient activation was a thing. So it's probably just historical oversight. I cannot think of an objection for why we should, I have seen no reason why we shouldn't consume. I suggest that we do it as a follow-up. I think it's orthogonal, but I would need to think about it just a bit more, but I suspect that I'm going to be, positive about this.
All right, thanks. That sounds great. I think we can go ahead and merge and do that as a follow-up.
Awesome. So just to clarify, the minutes reflect that we're going to merge a PR, making this particular change, and then file for feedback with the transient activation people and revisit this if we get negative feedback, right?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Awesome.
I would tend to file the GitHub issue at the same time you file the PRs, but that leaves some time for the people to give feedback.
I'm gonna be sending both of you an email just to make sure that that I ask the question. You guys have interacted with the relevant people a lot more. Just want to make sure that I ask a cogent question, right? I don't want to. So I'll just double check my issue with you guys. and then I'm going to file it on the relevant repo. And I take Janivar Nodin as he wants to help me. Thank you.
Sounds great.
Yes. So next thing, window audio, Johannes.
Yes, so my name is Johannes. I will present a proposal we have to add some, like a hint for window audio to get display media. You can take next slide, please. So get display media is an API to capture a user's display. This could either be a tab, window, or monitor. In addition, the application may offer audio capture by setting audio to true. And in this case, it will give the user an option to share either tab, system, or application audio. Some applications may prefer to not capture system audio due to various reasons. It could be privacy implications or anything else. And because of that, it was added this system audio preference enum, where the application can specify, okay, I want audio, but if you set this to exclude, it will give a hint to the user agent that you don't want system audio. Okay, so next slide, please. So the question is then, what should you do with window audio? And what should be captured if the user selects to share window and audio? Because the two, you could either capture application audio or system audio. And it's easy to like come up with examples where both seems like the sensible things. So like say one example that the user selects a video, the window of a video player, and then in that case, it's most likely that the user intended to share the video clip with the sound. So application audio would be most suitable in that case. Or another example, if the user selects the window of a PDF reader, for example, maybe recording themselves, giving lecture notes, giving a lecture about music. They might be showing sheet music in the PDF reader, and on the side they have some music player where they are playing the music. So in this case, system audio would be like the best thing to share. Next slide. So the core principle is that the user decides what to share, but the user might be busy, so the user agent tries to aim to offer the reasonable default values here. And you also can see in the previous example that the web application may also guide and exclude system audio, or it may exclude audio entirely if it will not use it. Because the web application offers more context about what the user is doing and can therefore give hints to the user agent what is the most suitable thing to share. So I have here on the right, I have made like a mock of just have Chrome's get display media picker would look like with some default and with some where the users can still change the value. So that leads us to my proposal here. If you take next slide. So the proposal is to add window audio preference enum to the display media stream options, where the web application can then give a hint to the user agent if it prefers to give the user an option to capture application audio or system audio, or even to exclude the option to capture audio for window display surfaces. So that's the proposal. So any comments from you guys? Yes, Jan-Ivar.
Yeah, so I know we have these include exclude options already to some extent, and I guess I'm questioning whether this sounds like it could be dealt with more as a user choice. So I'm wondering what the rationale is that the web application knows better to provide the defaults. And I guess my one concern would be that and more of a general concern rather than a complaint here is that in general, if web applications get to influence the way the user interface appears and its default values, then I could see some users might be surprised and assume that, oh, if I just hit OK, then I'll never get system audio except for this one application out there that somehow shared my system audio. Now that I understand it's a UX issue, not really a standardization issue. I guess I'm questioning if there's what's the use case where the application would know, for instance, that you wanted system audio with the window, for example.
I think that like various applications, you say you might have various use cases. So that one video conference application might prefer to have application audio, and the other one might prefer to have system audio. So I think that, I mean, it's, I wouldn't say it's in line with like the other ways you can select what the preference, what type of content you want to share, what is displayed first, and you can also select, as I said, if you want audio or not. So the web application may choose to, for example, if it doesn't want, if the user, if it prefers some kind of audio, it can still neglect what users shows. So therefore, this is just making the user more, how to say, not being surprised that the user selects something, but then the application didn't want that kind of audio, maybe would suggest to relaunch the get display media prompt. Ela, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think that you've made a very good point, and I'd like to reiterate it. And that is that, so the second question in Ivar had was about the web application influencing browser UX. And I think that's kind of downstream from the real thing that happens, right? Like what really happens is the application knows that if the user agent offers too much flexibility and the user chooses the wrong thing, the application is just going to ignore it, right? So we already have the precedent, like the application tells the browser if it even wants audio. We don't just generally always show the user, hey, want to share audio, because if the user chooses to share audio and the application just doesn't record it to disk, doesn't transmit it remotely, then it's just going to be useless and the user is going to be confused. And to that end, we basically ask the application informs the browser if it wants audio. And that means that there is already precedent for that. And what we want to do more here is align, right? So obviously, the minimum thing we want to offer is when you capture a window, you probably want to capture that window's audio. Behind the scenes, we know that, hey, it's not exactly the same thing. You're capturing an application window and you're capturing the same application's audio. But generally, most cases, like video player, you just capture that. The problem is that if we don't step in and allow the application to hint to us that it might want more, we're kind of forcing the application to then call get display media a second time and instruct the user to now share their entire screen with system audio, right? So there is a way around it, and applications are going to be forced to polyfill that way unless we give them a more privacy respecting way of saying, hey, I'm probably going to need system audio here. How about you offer that to the user?
So I have a question on the slide here, because it sounds like you're using the word application and to mean two different things here. So I have trouble understanding the first option, which is called, it says the application prefers that the option to share application audio is offered.
So the first should be the web application, the first application.
So the website prefers that the option to share. What is application audio in that case?
Applications audio is so often in the
window
application,
audio?
like the window belongs to a process. So the audio that is played by the process that belongs to the window, that the window belongs.
Okay. Yeah, could we call that window audio or something? That might be. Yeah. So we could bite shed on that. And I guess my last question then was whether, if that option could be called window, that might be easier to understand. Even though, of course, it might include other application audio. And for I agree there's some precedent here that these are mostly hints. Is that what you're aiming for with this as well? So that
same here. It's like it's not. So I think that's the hint thing is said where, like, where the system audio properties
Right.
defined. So the suggestion is to say have the same thing here, that this is a hint and it's not something that is that the user agent must follow, but it's a hint that gives some context to that.
So with that, I'm sympathetic with the use case, but I don't know that we would necessarily implement it. But I don't have a strong opinion, I guess.
Okay.
I see you in on the queue.
Yes. So, so you said that website might say, "Oh, I receive audio that I don't care, so I will not use it." So my question is how the web app will actually know that the audio that is provided is what it expects, because some user agents might provide audio but not window audio. Some user agents might provide what they think is the window audio, but it's difficult sometimes to get the actual audio process. So that's the first question. And the second question is, I see window there, but what about tab? The audio of the tab is easier to define, maybe, because we are user agent. Well, we are talking about user agents here. So what's the relationship of this proposal with the audio of a tab?
So our intention that is not to change the way tab audio is captured, so a lot of I guess a lot of the motivation from our side is Meet and that other video conferencing applications, and tab audio is causes less problems and it's less more confined, and it's for example system audio can cause some echo. You will capture. It's easy that you capture the audio of the meeting, for example, whereas tab audio doesn't have that problem really. So our suggestion is not do any changes to tab audio. Elad?
Yeah, so this neither touches tab audio nor precludes us from making future changes to tab audio, right? So basically, this is a hint that only corresponds to the case that the user chooses to share a window, in which case, they share the pixels of a window, and then the question becomes, what audio, if any, should be attached to that from the user agent's perspective of what they offer to the user first. Now, the user can still choose anything they want if the user agent offers that, but this is a hint of what you might want to show first. Now, you referred, Yuan, to the case where the application chooses to not use audio that was granted, and that's already an option. That's why we have exclude in there, right? Because if we know that the application is just going to dismiss any audio, then we shouldn't offer it. That's exclude, and that basically mirrors the way that we did it for capturing a monitor. And then between application and system, or between window and system, as Yanibra would prefer to do it, there are multiple ways that we could expose to the application what the user chose. First, we could choose that we don't actually show it, that this hint only influences the default, but then the application never gets to find out what was captured. That's one option. Another option is that we use media stream track.getSettings.display surface. Currently, it's only specified for video tracks, and it tells the application if the user chose a tab, a window, or a screen. So we can just expose that on the audio track as well and just discover the same thing, with the only two possible cases here being, monitor for system or, window for window. There are other possibilities. These are just the two off the top of my head.
So if I understand correctly, the approach would be that basically, if a user is selecting a window and there's an audio track, the web application by default will think, hey, it's a window, so it should be window. It should be the audio of the window and nothing else. Currently, there's no API to actually query that. And we might fix that in a follow-up. That seems fine. I guess then if a user is selecting a tab and is setting window audio to application, then it would be the audio of the window containing the tab, or it should be the window, the audio of the whole user agent. There are things like that that need to be defined in notes and so on.
I'm not sure I understood that, because to my understanding, if the user chooses a tab, it's always that tab's audio, at least with the way the spec will look after this particular change, right? This proposal does not affect the user choosing a tab at all. The only thing that can ever be affected by this particular change is if the user chooses to share a window. Everything else remains as untouched. And maybe we could massage the text a little bit to make it a bit clearer that this hint only affects the whatever user agent flow there is that ends up with the user choosing a window.
Yeah, maybe I'm fuzzy about the tab audio, but I can follow up after checking the spec.
Okay, thanks.
My follow-up question was related. What happens if I call get display media with video true and window audio application? I'm not specifying audio true. What happens in that case?
Then there is no audio at all.
No, sorry, no, that's there. So basically, the same thing that would happen right now if you specified audio empty dictionary, it's equivalent to audio true. I can double check that really quickly here, but to the because it's Boolean or dictionary, and any dictionary is a superset of true.
So this is ignored for video, the video block, right? Okay. Thanks. I see Dom on the queue.
Yeah, just to clarify, so there is an old pending pull request on window audio PR 283. Is the proposal here to update this to add this to replace include by application and system? Is that what the next step will look like?
I'm sorry, at least I couldn't really understand what Dom was saying. Could anybody else?
So, is this better?
Much better.
Yeah, I was asking, is this going to be an update to the existing pull request 283? Because that one has been pending for at least a couple of years. I don't think we ever merge include versus exclude option. So is that a replacement for this basically? Or?
Yeah, it's a replacement for that.
Okay.
You're saying 283? Yes, this we can take whatever is still useful there and extend it.
So my question still stands then, because the include options are outside of the window true, audio true. So it's possible to specify window true. Sorry, it's possible to say video true, audio false, and then window audio application.
Yes.
So hopefully it doesn't do anything then.
So that refers to an issue we had before. I suggested that self-contradictions should probably result in just it's like rejecting get display media with a relevant error, explain to the developer what went wrong. I would still prefer to pursue that, but I don't think that should be a blocker, because just like it's not been a blocker until now, because similar contradictions are already possible.
Okay, let's just follow what we do currently then.
So we're almost at time. So unless the next person is willing to donate their time, should the minutes reflect that basically everybody was on board with this proposal?
I'm not hearing any objections. So.
Okay, great. Thanks, Aram.
Okay, thank you very much. Can somebody else take over the presentation? I might have to go in a couple of minutes.
Okay, I can do it, but then I might not be able to go full screen if that's okay for people. Let's see. 1 second. 1 minute there. All right, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Hello? Yeah, okay, thank you. So next is media capture main. I think the first issue here is UN, is that right?
Yep. So it's an issue I filed a while ago, and there's no interpolative when a video track has enabled equal force in various places. So the fiddle above exposes that, for instance, request video frame callback is different between Chrome, Safari, and Firefox for enable equal force video track. For Chrome and Safari, it appears that the HTML video element is receiving the video tracks, but is rendering black. So what this means is that since it's receiving video tracks, request video frame callback will be called on any new video frame of the track. And similarly, if the video track is changing size, then the HTML video element will be resized accordingly. Firefox, on the other hand, I guess, decided that enable equal false means that the HTML video element is not receiving video track frames at all. Yeah, it's a typo there in the slide. And so request video frame callbacks will never be called in that case with enable equal false tracks. And the HTML video element size remains as is. So if the video track is changing while enable equal false, Firefox will update the HTML video element size when the video track is enable equal true. Next slide. So yeah, clearly it's not, it's an edge case probably, but still it would be good to clarify the specification and try to align with the implementation. If I look at the spec, I think that the intent is that things do not receive any video frame if a track is muted or if a track is disabled. And then it's up to the things to react to the signals. So for instance, we know that peer connection for enable equal false will actually send 1 black frame per second. HTML video element, we know it's rendering black. But what about request video frame callback? So there, I would tend to align with Firefox, which is closer to the spec. I looked at the other specs, media stream track processor. I don't think that there's anything to do there, hopefully. And for media recorder, the issue is that we're supposed to record black frames. But what is the frame rate that we should use? Or should we even record, well, we should at least record 1 black frame, but maybe we need to record more, but I don't know. So it's something we should discuss. So my question to the group is the overall approach to aligning with Firefox and clarifying the specification good? And then we can try, if so, we can try to tackle the various things like media recorder in follow-up discussions. What's Janivar?
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I'm actually not sure Firefox is correct in this case. I linked in chat to, if we search for track enabled in media capture main, it does say the result of the consumer is the same in this for both enabled and disabled, in the sense that whatever media stream track is muted or disabled or both, the consumer gets 0 information content, which means silence for audio and black frames for video. In other words, media from the source only flows when a media stream track object is both unmuted and enabled. For example, a video element sourced by a media stream containing only muted or disabled tracks for audio and video is playing but rendering black frames in silence. So it's hard for me to, even though I like less work in Firefox, it's hard for me to reconcile that with the current Firefox behavior.
That's interesting, because to me, zero information content means that if a track is changing size, you do not expose that, for instance. And
Yes,
this
but
is
it says the consumer gets zero information content, comma, which means silence for audio and black
oh,
frame
okay.
for video. So it's hard to
Okay. Then
Yeah.
that would be simpler for Media Recorder, actually. Then in that case, we can do that. Yeah, I didn't see this. So I'd like to do a clarification then.
But I
Yeah.
believe you're correct in your observations in Firefox. So
Yeah.
it's good to talk about.
Okay. So for request video frame callback, what happens is that you create a black frame with a given size. I guess it's fine as is. A media stream track processor, though, is in theory should then receive black frames also, which is not intended. I would prefer that media stream track processor does not receive any video frame. Basically, that was my in the spirit of being efficient. But then it contradicts the idea of yeah. I see Guido on the queue. Maybe we have.
Well, this is part of the things that we have been discussing with Newt, although this proposal is specifically for disabled tracks, more than muted. But yeah, this is part of the contradictions we have seen in the spec that we have wanted muted to mean for video to mean not sending video frames. So this is disabled, which is like similar but not exactly the same case. In that case, I think what Chrome does is it sends a single black frame. But I would need to double check what happens in all those cases. But yeah, I would like the idea of also saying that we don't send black frames, but we would need to experiment before we make the change, because I mean, since this is a status quo and two browsers are doing that, maybe we'll break something. So I guess I like the idea of disabled also to mean no frames delivered to sinks. But given that the spec currently says that browsers can do that, and some browsers actually do it, I think we would need experimentation to make sure that such a change doesn't break compatibility. Because I see compatibility risks here.
Yeah.
Yep. Just the GS fiddle is executing request video frame callback like for every frame. So I don't think it's a single black frame for the HTML video element, and it's also being resized as well. So there's something more than just one black frame being sent in Chrome, at least.
Yeah, it could be that that's the case. Yeah.
So I think if I can make an argument for black frames, I think it would be that I think the intention of the spec here was that both track enabled and muted were meant to be in content and in browser controls for that the user can use to make sure that they're not seen and control whether they're seen or not. And then in that context, I think a black frame ensures that you're not left in a mess. Other people aren't left seeing your frozen mug just because you decided to temporarily withdraw your video from a meeting. So I think that is the use case driving the black frames. That's my guess.
Yeah,
which might suggest the same for media stream track processor, actually.
Maybe the issue, at least in Safari, we have both muted tracks and enable equal false tracks, and they behave not the same currently. When the track is muted, the source is not providing any video frame. And for enable equal false, the source is still providing video frames, and it's at the sync that we are saying, hey, actually it's enable equal false, so now it's muted. So separate implementation for mute and disabled is not the same, and the intent of the spec, I believe, is that they should be somehow the same.
Well, I don't know if they have to be identical if they both satisfy black frames, whether it's one or several, perhaps. I see Dom.
Well, it's observable, so we need to define it.
Yeah.
Dom?
Yeah, it seems to me that there is so the desire to make sure the user has control about whether or not the camera is showing their mug is something we can keep, while also removing the need to actually send frames into things, which can indeed create unnecessary processing, in particular in the case of media stream track processor, but the request video frame callback could also be a source of heavy processing. So, I mean, maybe we go with a single black frame that doesn't react to change in constraints.
That seems good.
That way we get better of both approaches.
Yeah, but that would be good to me. It's the right behavior, and it's also good internally for user agents and video and processing in general.
Yeah, I agree. I think locally it's really hard to lose a single frame. And I think in the peer connection case, it's the only place where we can have loss of frames right now where repeated number of frames makes sense. So I support that.
Guido, would that be fine to you as well? Provided, I mean, okay. So, I guess
we'll need to look at the details in the PR. Yeah.
So I guess we could write a PR with those changes, and then it would be up to user agents to catch up and try to align with the spec. And if there are difficulties actually implementing this change, then we can revisit it. Okay, sounds good.
Great, thanks. Next, we have media capture output, which I think is UN as well.
Yep. Okay, so there has been an issue filed in various places in media capture output. There's one for 41, but actually there are two related issues in media capture output. And the idea is that some web applications want to set tab-wide audio output for the whole, like the whole tab should go to that speaker. And media capture output defines setting ID at the media element level. So it's doing that. But whenever you have a third-party iframe, or even if you do not have coordination in the whole of the page, then it starts to be difficult to switch audio to just one speaker. So in general, either for third-party iframes or for complex web pages with multiple audio elements and so on, it would be nice to have a type-wide audio output. And also, it's easier to align with how audio plays in iOS and Android, where there are some restrictions, and it's difficult to support multiple speakers at the same time. So having an API that is doing the job by default, like in most cases, and is and that we could implement in like all OSs. That seems like a good thing. So there are these issues. I know that Microsoft is pushing for a proposal in that area. It was discussed in the media working group at last meeting, twice in the past. So, and the proposal is basically to add an API somewhere in Navigator, maybe, to set the default speaker. And then you can use Media Element Sensing ID or Web Audio Sensing ID to override this default speaker. Next slide. So what is the scope of the default speaker? That's where we, during the discussions within the media working group, we were not exactly sure. So you call this API, and it will apply a default speaker. So either it will apply a default speaker to all the media elements in the tab, or it will only apply it to the context where it's called and to the children of them. Meaning, in the first case, you're a third-party iframe and you're calling this API, you will change the audio of the parents. So it's a highly privileged API. In the latter case, where the third-party iframe will only be able to route the audio for itself and its children, which is lower privilege. We are not really able to get consensus, so the current proposal is to only allow this API on the top-level context, where the scope is the same, whatever the default speaker scope we define. So I wanted to discuss this in the WEBRTC working group because not everybody was in the media working group. So I'm trying to gather feedback on this API, the interest, this default speaker scope, whether the current proposal makes sense, and also if people have thoughts or feedback on where the API should be in terms of working group, and maybe also in terms of API shape. So gathering feedback, basically. Thoughts? Yep, Janivar.
Yes. So I think this sounds good. As far as having answers to some of your questions, I don't know if I do. It seems to me that our existing, I don't believe I've seen many websites actually take advantage of the flexibility that the media capture output spec allows, that each element can have its different speaker. It sounds a bit over-designed, unless I can't really think of a use case where I would hear some audio in my AirPods and
There's
a
one
different
use
audio
case.
coming from my laptop. Sorry?
There's one use case. There's one use case that is known, is that at the beginning of a call, you might have a ringtone, and maybe it should not go in the same speaker than yeah.
Okay.
Like it's a notification. So a notification, an audio notification might be different than media audio. That's the use case I was pointed to for these complex cases. But other than that, yeah, I tend to agree that usually it's you move the audio for the whole page.
Right. Yeah, so that's good that we have a use case. I think in general, though, I'm not worried about maintaining flexibility here. So if there's any way to simplify this or limit it, that seems fine to me too. I don't have any more specific comments, I think, other than that seems a welcome change because it might simplify things, I hope. If it simplifies. If it doesn't simplify, that might not be great.
Yeah, okay.
But you're imagining that, oh, sorry, one more comment is that, so you're imagining that if I use both of these APIs, then I set it for the top level domain. I set default A, And then, but on a media element in my iframe, I set use the media element existing API, set sync ID to choose B, then it would use B. Is that right?
Yep.
So the only concern I have there is that not so much in the spec, but implementations, there might be some friction here because I know different browsers have different, have multiple default options, but that is outside of spec, I think. Like, because there can be an empty string. Some implementations also have like a virtual default speaker option that you might want to figure out how it would work with this, I guess.
Yeah, I need to file an issue about that. I guess Chrome has a default speaker entry, and Safari does not. Firefox does not either. And I'm wondering whether it would be a good idea to. I'm still thinking about whether we should converge there, maybe with a virtual audio speaker as well, exposed by default, basically. That might be good for compat and solve a few issues. But it's a separate issue, yeah. Done?
Yeah, in terms of where to make progress, I think my suggestion would be whichever group is ready to take over media capture output. So I guess what I mean is if you're doing this, you should also take over set sync ID. We should keep them together. I will say I haven't seen a lot of traction in WebRTC on that spec. So if the media working group is interested, I don't know that anyone would cry over losing it in this group. But conversely, this proposal might be also a way to bring back attention to the spec. So
yeah, so it was initially discussed within the media working group because I was thinking about exposing that API within the audio session object. And the audio session spec is in media working group. But yeah, it kind of makes sense to also, well, we could also decide to put it in the media capture output spec, in which case it would be probably in Navigator somewhere.
yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
And in general, I think the proposal scoping it to the top level context as a starting point makes also sense to me.
Okay. So nobody has feedback on default speaker scope then. Guido?
Yes, so in general, I'm supportive of the use case. We have to be careful when we talk about default because in media capture output, we use default. At least in a number of places, we talk about system default, which normally would interpret to mean the default of the operating system, not like the default of the page. But in some cases, it might mean that. So yeah, we have to be careful with regards to naming when we do that, so that we don't. So at least that we define the concepts clearly.
Okay. Sorry, I have a question for Yuan. Sorry, I have a question for Guido. In Chrome, is there a difference between set sync ID empty string and set sync ID to the virtual default device?
No.
Okay. Thanks. But there might be, if we go ahead with this proposal, is that right?
No, it would be the same. Oh yeah, it would be. No, you're right. Yeah. So well, it depends on how we define default, but yeah.
So the ways they defined in Chrome is that it's the operating system default. So whatever the operating system calls default is what default refers to.
Today, yes, but if we go with Yuan's proposal here, and there's a new default specified by the top level origin that overrides the OS default. My understanding is that would be chosen if an element, as long as an element has set sync ID to empty string, it would default to that rather than the OS, but not necessarily for your virtual device.
Correct.
So there would be a difference.
Yeah. So we probably, we probably, since this is going to be like a new API, we probably shouldn't use empty string to mean non-trivial things. So we should probably use identifiers that are more explicit. But yeah, we can. I think for now we're not discussing the specifics of the API, but more like support for the use case and having an API to support the use case, which that case we're generally supporting.
So Guido, maybe it's not a question for you, but maybe for Google Meet. So Google Meet can be integrated into things like Google Docs or things like that. So web pages that can play audio somehow. And so you might, I don't know how it's integrated, but one cases might be that WEBRTC logic is in its iframe, which is embedded into a top level page, and both are playing audio. So in that case, what would be the most interesting approach for that kind of web page? Is it like to have a single place where you switch audio, be it either in the iframe or the top level frame, or would it be good to have like under control two different settings somehow? Because that may help select the default speaker scope.
I think we have to think about it and inform, discuss it internally, and then
yeah. So if
form,
that's good. So if you can do that, that's good, and report them. That would help a lot. Yanivar?
Sorry, I had some time to think about default speaker scope, and I think it makes sense for it to be recursive and basically all media elements of the context and its children. That's usually how iframes work anyway, is that, you know, with delegation of permissions, for example, policies. So
Yeah,
that's the
if
behavior I
there's
think I
no,
would expect.
yeah. To me, if there's no use case, no strong use case, then it's easier to do that. But if there's a strong use case where it would be actually much better to have a picker in third-party iframe, and the top level page is saying, okay, I'm delegating my audio routing to that iframe, then we could do the work. I think it's more work, so that's why I'm trying to understand whether we have a use case.
Well, the iframe could still use the existing set sync ID on the element, right?
Yeah, but then it's different IDs because it's not the same origin, and one iframe may have the list of devices, but not the other iframe, and so on.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion. I just want to give an opinion.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, Dom?
Yeah, for the minutes, what is the resolution then, if any?
I think so. What I'm taking is that the WEBRTC working group thinks that we should proceed. I think that we should decide. So the WEBRTC working group think that whoever does that should also do maintenance of media capture output, and that maybe Google folks will report back on default speaker scope in the future.
Thanks. You're muted, Yuan.
Yeah, I was just saying we can go to the next topic.
All right, great. Thank you. I think we had a lot of time allotted for that one, so that's good because I think we're going to pick up. We might have time to finish the grab bag then. So the grab bag has 3 issues, 2 WebRTC PC issues and 1 media capture main issue. And I'll cover those So the first one was issue 3046. Validate an ICE server URL. It's missing length check for username. So there's a discussion. I didn't quite the whole discussion here, but I did provide a PR to add some language. Basically, there's some inconsistencies between browsers here that you can look at in the issue if you wish. I decided to summarize a PR suggestion, which is to add the following language in, I guess it's yellow or orange. To read the whole thing, paragraph 7, step 7 would now read for parsing a URL. This is the inside the peer connection constructor options for the ICE server's URL and options. So if post URL scheme is turn or turn s, and either of server username or credential are missing, that's the existing language. And then we add, or their UTF-8 representations fail to conform to RFC 8489, section 14.3, and RFC 8265, section 4.1, respectively, then throw in an invalid access error, which I think would align around a mix of Safari and Firefox behavior, where Safari has the right number of characters, which is 509, but I think Firefox returns the right, I think Safari returns type error instead of invalid access error. So this is what it, so this means basically that the 3 examples we have below here, that exceeding 408 characters would give you an invalid access error. And I'll skip number 2 here for a second, but also if you specify 0 credentials, we get invalid access error. Sorry, I skipped the part that was relevant. I did the RFCs basically currently. I've highlighted some text from the 2 RFCs that we're referencing, which is basically that username is a variable length value that must contain a UTF-8 sequence of fewer than 509 bytes and must have been processed under the opaque string profile. That actually means that a 0 length, the way I'm reading that, means that a 0 length username is fewer than 509 bytes and therefore is valid, which is the second line in the examples below. But for credential, RFC 8265 is very explicit that a password must not be 0 bytes in length. So that's how I arrived at the 3 meanings at the bottom. Thoughts? Ewan?
Yeah, I would only say let's do some WP testing. Let's write some WP tests and let's have it fixed. Do you see any potential web compatibility there? It doesn't seem so, but
I don't think so. They seem like edge cases to me, both of them. I mean, most likely a server is not going to have an account with an empty username, so you're going to get a 401 for one of those. I should know my HTML here. But you probably will fail anyway, but not in the constructor. Because if the server did have an account with an empty username, it would still require a password, and that is valid as far as I can tell from the RFCs.
okay. I think maybe Chrome is actually like I think Safari is throwing, but maybe Chrome is just not using them silently. So that's why I was wondering.
I can look at the issue here. Ignores usernames longer. Yeah. Okay. I'm not hearing any objections. Ewan?
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that it was an invalid state, invalid access error. I think Telf error makes more sense, but since the spec is already stating invalid access error, then it's fine.
Okay. Great. I'm not hearing any other objections, so maybe we can state that we can merge the PR. All right. I'm moving on to the next slide. This is also in WEBRTC PC. WEBRTC PC issue 3045. Inconsistent initialization of transceiver receiver track get settings. And again, there's different. There are no two browsers that have the same behavior here. So that's why we picked this to hopefully standardize it a little better. And from my reading of the constrainable pattern, it disallows uninitialized values. The constrainable pattern talks about a constrainable property that has 3 exposures, basically, before, whether it's supported, whether it has, what its capability ranges are, how they can be those capabilities can be constrained, and what the current setting at the moment is. But we are seeing some implementations leaving out dictionary members entirely until basically a frame is produced. But that doesn't seem to be supported, because here it says a settings internal slot initialized to a settings dictionary describing the current active settings values for each constrainable property exposed, as explained under setting, or an empty dictionary if it has none, which none is a bit vague here, but I think it means that it has no constrainable properties exposed, as opposed to no currently active settings. So the MIDI capture main spec gives guidance here, where it says it's recommended to look at existing implementations to select meaningful default values. At the time of writing, implementations tend to use the following default values, which were chosen, and this is in MIDI capture main, by the way. We were still chosen for the suitability for using RTC peer connection as a sync, and it proposes 640 for 80, frame rate 30, and echo cancellation through for audio. So the proposal is to apply the same guidance to WEBRTC PC, which means that if you call track get settings on a receiver you just created, you would get aspect ratio 1.3333, frames 30, height 480, and width 640. And as soon as you receive an actual frame, it would be updated to be, more reliable information. Ewan?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see it 640, 480, 30 from media capture main. These are really settings provided by default to get user media. So it's while in this case you get something from the user agent, and so I don't think that these values necessarily make sense here. For instance, the track is receiving no frame initially. So the frame rate, for instance, should be 0. That makes more sense. And
Okay.
I prefer a case where the settings are in a state, and when we receive the first video frame, then we have a change. Meaning, oh yeah, now we have the real settings. There, when you have that, you don't know whether the real settings are 480, 640, or whether you haven't received a video frame. So I know that Safari is using 00 everywhere, which is an initialization that is sort of okay as well, except for aspect ratio, of course. Yeah. So I would tend to, if we have to say something, I think it's good that we try to converge on what settings we expose in general. And if we agree, I would tend to try providing 0, for instance, here, instead of 30 or values.
Okay, you're proposing all zeros. That could work. So I guess that's a related question here. I think in MIDI capture extensions, we have the on configuration changed event, but I don't think we've spoken about if that would come into play here, for example. So when you receive a frame, would you expect that event or not?
Yeah, in theory, it should, I guess. Safari does not implement a configuration change on the connection tracks. So.
But I guess for the working group, did we expect it to be applied here? I suppose. Guido?
Well, I have an opinion similar to Joan's that like those values, I don't see them making sense for a remote track. Do you know what browsers actually do? I don't know what I don't know what any
Yes, let
browser
me
does.
look to the issue here. So, so Safari has zeros and not a number for aspect ratio. Chrome initializes device ID and resize mode none. And Firefox has nothing yet because we haven't implemented it.
Yeah, I guess those two are inherited from the capture main because it's from the time when we hadn't made the distinction that these are only for let user media tracks and like so it predates that. So it's basically right. I think the intent is that it's doing the same thing as Firefox. I think not exposing anything for something that hasn't received any frame looks good to me. But if you want to expose something, I guess it would need to be something like what Safari is doing, like zeros, which mean largely the same as not exposing anything. So yeah, that's yeah. I would definitely not like exposing 640 480 because in get user media that means that's the intent to how you would try to open the camera with. So those defaults have that intent, which does not exist here because you cannot influence anything here. So yeah, I'm definitely opposed to 640 480. I'm more inclined to like not exposing anything until you have information. But if we have to expose something, yeah, it would need to be zeros or equals.
All right, so thank you. I'm hearing 0 likes for 640 480 and some likes for 0. But also that we could remove it entirely. I think my view is that I'd be okay with 0